Right, so now that we've done and tested this endpoint over here, what we want to do is test the second one, which is when we submit a form. We want to, first of all, submit the form, check that the CSRF is valid, and then we get access to the username in the request.body. And then again, if all being well, we'll have form submitted successfully. So that is what we need to test now. And then in here, what I've done is I've added the log for the CSRF token here to see if we're getting it in our React application, which we are doing. And then I've also logged it in the handle submit over here. So now let's just run our backend. So npm start. Now the server is running on localhost 5001, and then we have our React application running as well. So if we refresh the page, and now you can see we are getting our CSRF token over here. Again, let's just check in the application as well. So if we go in application, in the cookies, we need to set it. So we have one here, but let's just clear the cookies and here as well. Now what we want to do is submit the form. So again, if we run through the process of what's going to happen is we'll do a post request, passing in the headers of XCSRF token and the CSRF token in here. This is the one we've logged already in the console, and then we should get alert form submitted successfully. So I'm going to test this out, and I think this will fail. And if it does fail, then that is a good sign because we need to enforce some more changes in our code. So on our server side and also our client side. So let me submit this. And now you can see here it says post submit form 403 forbidden. So that is good because, again, even though these are matching, so in the handle submit and so on, we need to enforce some further checks. So that's a good sign. So basically, this is saying that actually, if we go back into our blog, if we go right to the top, it says, why does it matter here? So it's a security vulnerability that occurs when a malicious website makes a request to a different site on behalf of an authenticated user. So because we're using this site is the React app on 3000 and the server is on 5001, we need to be able to say that this is actually verified. So this is where we need to add some extra steps, extra checks in place. So that's good. So in our code, if we go in our code, and there's a few steps we need to do. So the first step, I'm just going to bring in the code, and in our server, first of all, we have this code set up here, which is allow cross origin requests for development. That's fine. But what we want to do is we want to specify the origin. So in our case, it is localhost 3000. So this is the only origin we should be using at the minute. Then what we want to do is the CSRF protection, which is here. Then we want to use the CSRF protection like so. So app.use, serve the React build files. In our case, is serve the React files like that. So we also need to add the cookie in here. So let me just quickly add that in and bring it in. So in here we have response.cookie xrf token is equal to the token. So this sets the CSRF token in the cookie. And again, it returns the JSON response in the body as well of the CSRF token. So this is all to do with the use effect that is running in the client. So let me just first of all double check that this is working fine. We are receiving this set CSRF token, which is logged here as CSRF token state. So now that's the cause part complete. What we now need to do is we are defining the CSRF protection over here, and then we are using this protection, which is basically this third-party package that we have. We're serving the React files over here, and then we are essentially getting the endpoint to get the CSRF token. So that's all good, and we're passing in the token in here. But what we also want to do is pass in the cookie. So I'm just going to bring that in as well, and we want to set the cookie over here, and that is going to be to this, which is rec.csrf token. Let me save that. And what we want to do is we want to be able to test that this is still working. So let me do npm start on our backend to restart our express server. Let's actually do the front end as well, npm start once again. So now that's all fine. We're getting the token state, so the CSRF token is working correctly. Let me just test to see if this submits, which it doesn't, which is what we expect. So now what we want to do is work on this one here. So again, the CSRF protection is the handler or the middleware that is run before any request or response is made. So if it passes this check, then again, the callback over here will obviously log the received username and then also return the response.json as form submitted successfully. So that's all good on that side. What we need to do now is in the React side over here, we also want to check with credentials in our Axios.get response. So what essentially happens is we fetch the CSRF token from the server. So we're getting it from the server, and then we want to include cookies in the request. So that's why we have with credentials true in there. So that's the first part complete. But then in the handle submit in here, we also need to do an extra check. So in here, we want to do with credentials true as well, because on the server, in this get request over here, we set a cookie over here, and that cookie is getting set in the cookie in our application tab. So let's find this cookie now. It should essentially be the same as this one over here in our response. So if we go into the browser and we search this, so copy this, and in application, in cookies, so again, what I think we need to run the server again once more. So let me just save everything and close this down, npm start. This one should be fine. In our browser, let's refresh. And now you can see the cookie is being set, which is this value over here. And this should be the same as what's in the console. So if you do Command F and V, you can see that's the same in there as well. So the first part is complete. And then we are essentially submitting the form. So that's what we need to do next. But we need to pass this argument in here, which is with credentials true. So that is basically including the cookie in the request as well. And then that is everything. So essentially now, when we do our post request, so when we submit our form, what will happen is we will do an Axios.post request to this submit form over here. So in our server, we are calling this endpoint here, app.post. We need to pass the CSRF protection over here, the middleware, and then this will respond with form submitted successfully. So in here, we have the form data, and then in our headers, we want to pass in the CSRF token in the headers and also include the cookies in the request. That is everything we need to do. So now let me just save it all and then close everything down, and we will restart the server and we will restart the React application. So if we look at the entire flow, what will happen is we set the CSRF token in the server. So in our Express app, we pass it down to the React app over here in the use effect. The use effect then sets the state of our CSRF token. And then that CSRF token is what we need to pass in the header of any requests that we make. So any HTTP requests, which in our case, we are requesting to submit this form. And then in the protection, it should include the CSRF token generated from our server. So from this API CSRF token endpoint, and it should also pass back to the server each time we make an API request. So essentially, each time the user has a session, each time the CSRF token will change, which again enhances security, and it also verifies that this person is who they actually are. So now what we want to do, we've fetched the token from the server. That's fine. But now we want to submit the form, which is to /API/submit form. And let me just put in Imran codes in here. And in the header, so in the payload, we want to be able to pass this back in to say, this is actually who we say we are. So let me press submit. And now you can see it says form submitted successfully. So now I can press OK. And that is how the flow works with CSRF protection. So again, if you read this, this is very handy, especially when you're working in a production environment, because you need to make sure that your customers are safe. You need to make sure that your app is safe and that you don't have any attacks on your server or your application. So this is important. If you look at the blog over here, there's reasons why, and I've included them in here. So here you can see, without proper validation, this request can carry out sensitive actions such as transferring funds, deleting records, or changing account details. This is just some of the examples, but you need to think and get into this mindset as well, that when we're working with front end and back end and so on, we need to think about security because that is very important in a production environment. So that is how you would do it with CSRF, the package. Now, what I'm going to do next is I'm going to create a middleware that will do this for you if you don't have the capabilities to use an external package. So I will do that next.